Perfect. Thank you so much, Jasmine. So my name is Jordan. I worked alongside Jasmine over at Filevine for a couple years, and now I specialize mostly in FVDA and AI fields and things like that. So today we're going to kind of just be jumping in. If you guys have specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can address them. Perfect. We already have some in here. And is this one mostly for FVDA today, right, Jasmine? Or are we doing kind of just anything Filevine related? So
it's FVDA, but we can answer that. Some first caps only, some lowercase only. For tags in Filevine, you are going to, or your team has put those in either manually or in the back end for you all to utilize. So that more so a use case for your team. So not sure if there is a difference. Caps, you can go in or they were there upon launch. So some of the tags are already in Filevine, like attachment, email, text message. Those are already in there. Some of the other ones may have been added in by like somebody that was implementing you. Maybe it was us, and we were going in to show you how to add tags, and doing some kind of examples there. You can view your tags if you're an admin in the back end. I can show you what that looks like. Just give me a second. I always get logged out of my orgs when I'm in them. So I'll pull that up and show you kind of where you can go to manage your tags. There should be, or you have the option to add in some descriptions, I guess they're considered, into your tags so you can verify whether or not those are the ones that you should be utilizing, or if they're utilized for a certain use case. Yes, you can also merge the tags. There shouldn't be a difference. Again, you would just want to check with maybe your super admin, the person that is kind of in charge of any of the changes, and maybe that's you. If so, there's no difference between them. It's really just how you all enter them into Filevine. So for tags, I'll show you our sandbox. This may look a little bit different than kind of what you all are seeing. Okay. So to get to your tag repository, you're going to go to advanced. All the way at the bottom here, you'll see tag manager. And you'll be able to see kind of all of yours. So we have some that are lowercase, some that are uppercase. It's really just how they were added in. So like auto tagged, that's uppercase. You have a few ways that you can add tags in. So I'm guessing that when somebody created the tag, they just typed it out in all caps, or they typed it into a project in caps. You can definitely merge them to do that. You'll just select the ones that you want merged and then utilize this merge tags. But again, double check. Some of them do have descriptions that will let you know, hey, modifying this is going to prevent it from automatically being utilized. Your admins may have gone in and added some descriptions there so you know when to use them or when not to use them, and that might be a difference as well. Perfect. All right, and I saw we have had somebody else join, so feel free to use that Q&A feature down at the bottom for any questions that you have. We're going to hop into kind of FVDA and get any questions answered. If not, we'll show you some tips and tricks in utilizing FVDA, Outlaw, Doc Assembly. They're all the same.
perfect. Yeah, I can go ahead and start sharing my screen here if we want. It sounds like last week there was some questions maybe on the settlement calculator. Maybe we start there. I don't know any folks joining us today. If you guys have any specific questions about FVDA, we're obviously here to answer those. So, just kind of let us know if you have any specific questions. But I don't know, Jasmine, if you remember from last week, if there was anything specific brought up that we can just go ahead and touch on with the settlement calculator today, or if we just kind of want to walk through that.
Um, I don't remember the specifics. I know we answered them on the call last week, but we just had a few kind of, hey, how do I do this? One was about the signature and having that auto page break. So we gave them kind of a workaround instead of using the signature box add-in to just adding in kind of spaces for them to be able to upload to VineSign. So
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point too, because a lot of folks, I mean, you're already in Filevine, you're probably using VineSign already. So it's a lot easier to just go ahead and send this through VineSign instead of then having to get your clients acclimated to a whole new way of signing through Outlaw. So like Jasmine's saying, what you can do, you can come in here. And look at, I guess I haven't logged into this account in a while, so it's showing me all these walkthroughs. You can now add conditions to captions, which has been out for a few months now. But I always like to kind of add in a caption and then just kind of, I'm hitting just shift and then the underscore here to just add in basically what's going to turn into my signature line when I send this through VineSign. And then I like to sometimes just go ahead and add in a variable. If you're new to FVDA, a variable is something that you can actually pull into your Filevine to basically populate information. So in this case, maybe I want to put the project client's name. The project client's typically that contact card in the left-hand corner up at the top of your project when you open it in Filevine, right? So if I want to insert a new variable here, I can go ahead and just hit a bracket. When I hit a bracket, I'm able to start inserting any of these variables that are available to me. For the most part, if you're using Filevine, you're going to want to use your connected variables because this is going to have data that you can automatically pull in. So you can either click on connected here. You can see this opens up all the different fields that I have in my Filevine, or you can just do a plus sign. That'll get you there the same way. And then you can start typing things in. So if I wanted to insert the project client, I can start typing in project. You can see that this now pops up for me. And then if I click on it, it's going to open up and give me all the variables or anything available that has to do with that specific project. So maybe if I just want to pull in, the project ID, we have that available to us. We also have the project incident, the project number, all those fun things, even the primary information there. Obviously, in this case, we just want to go ahead and pull in the project client name. So we can go ahead and just click on this. It is a contact card, so it's going to open up more fields for us. In this case, we just want that full name, so it's right at the top. But if we did want to pull in more information, you can see here that we have, address information, emails, different things like that. So that is available to us. And then we would just click the one we want. And now that is going to populate the project client's name. And let me see if we have a proofing ID in here, because we might be able to show you guys just what that would look like. It's thinking about it. We might not. But essentially, that's just going to pull in whatever that project client's name is. So if it's John Doe right up there at the top, it's now going to populate with John Doe. And then when you send this through VineSign, we can just get their signature up on this line right here. So that's how you can do that. You can also force a page break like we were talking about right here if we wanted to. So if we wanted this signature block to be on its own page by itself, you can go ahead and insert a page break there manually. And you can just do that by clicking this on or off at the top of the page. You would just select the paragraph that you want to start that new page with, and then just click that there. So now we can have a couple of different page breaks available to us there. Something else that might be pretty new to folks if you're not living in FVDA every day is the ability to actually pull in singular addresses. Previously, when you would basically code out a template, it would pull in all the addresses. So if a client had 3 addresses, it would pull in all of those, and you might just be wanting it to send it to one address. So it's pretty cool now that you can actually pull those in. You can actually do the same thing. You can go over here to variable. And we're just going to hit the bracket and plus. And then let's say if we wanted to stick with our project client here and we wanted to pull in their address, you can see here, I have the ability to pull in all their addresses, whether it's a work, home, default, whatever it may be, Or I can say, I just want to pull in their home address here. You can see I also have a work and an other, a default. So those are all available to us now. You can kind of choose which type of address you want to pull in. You will notice that once you click one of them, you have an option if you just want to pull in maybe the first line of it, or just maybe the label. You have kind of a full range of capability on how you want to pull this in. So if you wanted to go through and make a nice address block like we do in our DocGens, you can come in here. We selected that line 1. We can also click in here for their work address. We can select our line 2 or our city, and we can start building that address block. And it's only going to show us the addresses that are labeled for work, which is really nice. So we don't, pull in multiple addresses at a time and have to delete things. So this is a new feature that was, I think, released maybe a month or so ago, maybe a couple months now. But it's been really beneficial when you're just trying to pull in one of those addresses. I'm going to pause there, see if we have any questions on how to do anything I just talked about, those page breaks, making a signature line, or even just inserting individual addresses there. We can just go ahead and insert another one too while we're waiting, but it's pretty cool. I mean, and also if I don't want to insert a work address, I can come in here and I can reselect another one, right? So maybe I just want to insert their home address here. I could definitely pull that in and then start building out my address block for those if I want to. I also do have the option to just pull in the full address if I'd like. If I pull in the full address here for home, everything's going to be on one line. So, their street address, city, state, zip, just one line going across like that. If I break it out individually, like I have here for the work addresses, this is more of what we would see as an address block, right? So we'd have their line 1, we can have their city, we can come in here, we can also insert their state if we wanted to, and really just build out that address block if we needed to. So those are options that we have available to us. Obviously, for the address block, it's just a few extra steps to get that added in. But then, if I wanted to insert this maybe at the top, maybe I have a letter that I'm sending out, I can always copy this, and then I can come up here and maybe paste that in another paragraph. I'm just going to start a new one. And you can see there, I now have this address block coded out, and I don't have to worry about retyping it, because sometimes that's what takes the longest with coding things out in FVDA. Awesome. Not seeing any questions pop up just yet. But let me know if there's anything else specific we should cover there. I think also on that same topic, just being able to pull in individual addresses, you can come in here now, and that's actually also available for repeaters. Previously, repeaters, you could just pull in the full address, but now you can actually break it out and pull in, say, a one line or something for a specific one. If you guys aren't familiar with repeaters, they can only be used in conjunction with collection sections. And collection sections, if you guys aren't familiar with those in Filevine, they are sections at the top, very similar to probably your insurance section, where you can hit add item, and you'll be able to add more and more insurance items. And so you can actually repeat that information in a repeater and pull in all those individual collection section items if you need to. Now, the reason that works with a repeater is because there's obviously multiple collection section items typically that you can pull in. So if you go in and add a repeater here, and then we do have to select our data source. That's essentially the collection section that you want to tie this to. So we could say maybe we just want to tie this to our medicals. Now, if you went to this data source and you don't see your section in here, there's a good chance that it's a static section, and therefore it's not compatible with a repeater because you don't have that add item option up at the top. So that's what kind of distinguishes a collection section from a static section, and then also how it plays nicely with FVDA and how we can use repeaters. So we can see here we've now added in our repeater. You're always more than welcome to give this a name. So maybe we want to call this, medical, we can call this medical providers that we're going to be pulling in, because maybe we want to pull in different addresses for those medical providers. You can see once I named that here, it does reflect that name, because in some documents you might have multiple repeaters, and if you don't give them a quick name here, it's just going to say like repeater 1, repeater 2. and you might not know what field or what section that ties to in Filevine. So this kind of just helps you stay in line and keep track of all your different repeaters there. Now, something different of how we were coding things out, right? So previously we did this bracket, and then we could start coding out using our Filevine variables. When we use a repeater, we don't actually use this bracket. You can see I can still type it into there and I can still pull that in. But what we actually want to insert, and you might be able to see it here, it might be very faint. I'm going to zoom in really quick, but it's this squiggly bracket. I don't know the actual name, but squiggly bracket will get us there. I think most people might know it by that anyway. But basically, all you want to do is go ahead and do that shift and shift bracket, and that turns it into that squiggly bracket. And you can see here that I can now pull in any fields that are associated with my medicals tab over here. So you'll see the first one I have up here is medical provider. Maybe for each item, we want to go ahead and pull in a provider. And Jasmine, while I'm setting this up, if you're still logged into our sandbox, can you just grab like the project ID from like Harry Potter? Because I'll show them what this looks like once we get it set up. Thank you so much. So basically we can just code this out and say, maybe we want to say all the providers' names, and then we're also going to want to code out their addresses. So previously we only had options to code out their entire address. Now we can actually pull in, you know, address line 1, we can pull in just their work address if we wanted to. You can see as soon as I clicked into work address, it's going to say, do you want the full address, or do you want to break it down and say, let's actually have an address block here. So now we have that available to us in repeaters, because that did not used to exist. So that's kind of nice. I won't sit here and make you guys watch me code out a whole address block, but we'll go ahead and just, code out some of this so that we can see that. And then also, if there was something else maybe not related to the provider, maybe you want to see the amount. You do have to know the names that you're searching for within this step. So I might need to get out the provider realm here and see what we have. We have person being treated. We obviously have a lot of contact information in here.
Original balance.
Original balance. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you so much. So you can see that it is called original balance here. So when I typed in amount, that is why it didn't come up. But as soon as I started typing in original balance, I now have that available to me. Something you can also do in case you don't want to just have in these variables, you can also type it out. So if you wanted to maybe give some instruction text, we could call this one amount if we wanted to. And then we can also just say, provider. So you can also type other things into here. A lot of times we will also see this maybe for certificates of service, right? If you're listing out multiple, attorneys and who they're representing, you might want to list out each of these as a repeater so that you can all have those on your certificate of service. But you are free, obviously, to type out as much information as you want here, and each thing will repeat. And then
the nice thing about repeaters within the collections section, the squiggly brackets are going to be your collection section items, like Jordan mentioned. So you can still choose which ones you want added in. You don't have to add every single provider that you've added into Filevine into this document, but those squiggly brackets will allow for that variability. And then the standard text is going to be static. If you want to bring in any static information, so you're like, we have all this information in our medical section, but there's data I want to bring in from my intake section or my client's name or anything like that, you can still bring those into these repeaters. They're obviously not going to be variable changes like you have for your provider and things like that, but you can still bring that name in or whatever other data point from a static section in as well with that bracket.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great way to distinguish between the two, because I definitely have folks that email me and are like, oh, I'm trying to use a repeater, but it's only pulling in one collection section item. And it's typically because they used our regular bracket here instead of that squiggly bracket that'll allow you to repeat information and pull in multiple ones. So let's see here if we have our connection or proofing ID. I don't know if the best way is to just like, you can tell me what it is, or I can drop it in.
I sent it in the chat to you.
Oh, let me see. Oh, here it is. I was looking at the other chat.
Sorry. Um, so
Okay.
the proofing ID is a way for you to not have to generate or test your data within Filevine. Maybe you don't really have a test project or anything like that, and you don't want your document section being cluttered with test documents to make sure it's pulling in correctly. The proofing ID is a great way for you to add in the project ID from Filevine here and then test out the document to make sure that things are pulling in correctly. It's looking the way that you want before kind of giving the green light to be generated in Filevine.
Perfect. So what we should see now, and I guess I might need to check, this should populate information. Actually, let me check one more thing. Sometimes we have these red variables, and typically if we have too many of those red variables, they won't generate the information properly. So just as good housekeeping, I like to go through and delete these. You can also see that we have some that are maybe in use, but also have little trash cans next to them. I like to just go ahead and delete those because we're not using them on this template currently. And then that just slims down on the variables that we have to keep up with there. So that should be all good now. And now let's see if we get any information that populates for us here. Amazing. So you can see here, we now have our Harry Potter case and the incident date is populating here. And we also have some settlement amount information that is actually pulling in from our settlement section in Filevine. So that's where all this information is populating. And we can go back through and we can do a little run through of the settlement calculator if we want. But I did want to show you guys basically what the settlement, what this medical repeater is going to look like. We can also see here, this is our signature block that we had previously built in. So we have this automatically populating with the client's name. It's ready to get sent off to VineSign, and we're ready for Harry Potter to sign here to accept his settlement. But if we wanted to see how the repeater works that we just set up together, you do notice it says select medicals here. So we would click on this. And there's no collection section. Sometimes we have to do one other step here where we do have to go in and configure. So if I click back onto this repeater and I can click configure here, this is a recent change that went through. Typically, once you code these out, that's what gets pulled in. You don't have to worry about it. I think though they're making it more dynamic so that you can have repeaters here, and then you can also limit kind of the information that's exchanged between Filevine and here. So we can go ahead and click in and click through some of this information. And then I think we're also going to want to find our original balance. Perfect. So I'm just searching through the collection section here to find it, just because as you can see how small this little scroll bar is, there's lots of different options. So instead of scrolling through all of those, we can just go ahead in and select those. And now when I go back to preview this, we should have some information that we can pull in from medicals here. Perfect. So we can see here, we do have the provider name and we do have the original balance filled out on most of these. We do see that our work address is empty. That is likely because in Filevine, we have not designated an address for any of these providers to be their work address. And therefore, because nothing's labeled that way, it's not pulling in an address. This is also one of our test projects, so there might not even be an address in there for this provider at all. But that's why we're kind of seeing this as blank here. Now, something else that's pretty cool that you can choose is you can actually arrange these. You know, if you wanted to arrange these alphabetically to pull in the providers, you can. If you'd rather arrange them by the original balance, you can. So you have an option on how you want to pull in these medicals for these repeaters. You also have the option to either select all. You can come in here and select all these medical providers, or maybe I don't want to select a couple of them. Maybe I'm missing information like the original balance. So, you know, it doesn't really behoove me to show that on the settlement document. So you can go in here and you can pick and choose which ones you like. Another question I get asked a lot, specifically relating to settlement calculator, is, well, what if there's certain expenses we don't want to include on the settlement, you know, disbursement sheet to the client? That's totally fine. You can come in here and you have full autonomy to pick and choose the ones that you want. So it's just a matter of instructing your staff, you know, if you're going to forego soft costs and not, you know, pass that on to the client, just instructing them to leave that off. Or if it's more on a case-by-case basis, it's like, oh, this was, a smaller settlement than we would like to get for this client. We're going to waive some of our internal expenses. You can always go in there and pick and choose which ones you would like. So now that I have these selected, I can go ahead and hit update here. And you can see now I have this paragraph repeating for each of those providers. I selected this for 3 providers, and therefore I'm repeating this paragraph that we configured in the backend for each of those. So you can see that this is just some random text that you can add if you so choose. Obviously, that repeats for each one. So sometimes it might be a matter of you want to add more information after you generate this. You can always click in and actually edit these paragraphs and then maybe type in, the provider Hermione Granger, you can include some other medical information that you would think was important to this, or maybe they still owe medical liens on this and they need to pay this provider that $150,000 out of their settlement. So that is something that you can always go in and add, but you might not want to have it on the actual paragraph itself because the repeater, like its name dictates, is just going to repeat this information. So you can see we just have this information repeating for each one. So that's kind of how those will work. We can also see here that the client information, this is a variable that we just hard coded in. It's going to be obviously the same client because we are using this hard coded in field. But if you needed that to change, maybe there was a few different I don't know, plaintiffs or other folks within this project that you're working on that saw this provider, you could always pull this information in with a squiggly bracket if you had, let's say, person treating. I think we have that. Yeah, person treating. So, you could pull that in if you didn't want to just use the hard-coded variable there as well. So cool. Any questions on how to insert a repeater, how to code out your repeater, anything that we just did there, how it generates the same paragraph, any of that? I'll pause for a moment and let you guys type in any questions that you guys have for that. Cool. We could also do a walkthrough just of the settlement calculator, how that works. I think I'm going to go ahead and delete this repeater if there are no more questions, just because it doesn't really quite fit here in our settlement calculator template. But we can go ahead and delete that. Also, it's worth noting that this settlement calculator template, this is our very basic setup. So this one we can typically get set up with firms in about 50 minutes. That's 50. And anything outside of that, I mean, we've built out some pretty complex settlement calculators. I know I'm working with a few clients now to build out more of those. But some of those, I mean, if you have multiple iterations, maybe you're doing workers' comp and you're doing PI and you're doing contingency or you're doing flat fee, there might be different ways on how you want these settlement calculators to look. So we're always happy to build out different iterations. Also, if you settle, maybe if you have more than one settlement per case, I know that's pretty common. So I mean, I've built out settlement calculators that can disperse, maybe 4 settlements either at the same time or separately. And so that relies on a lot of conditional logic, which if we click into a paragraph here, you can see that conditions show up. And you can make conditions based off of how many settlements there are, if it's a UIM settlement, if it's a liability settlement, if they're settling in a certain jurisdiction. So I know sometimes some states have certain parameters and other states are like, well, we settle this way. So, if there's anything that you're looking at this saying, oh, this would be really helpful for my firm, but this is just the basic level, we're always happy to build out customized ones. Obviously Jasmine and myself, we've built out a few for clients. So definitely let us know, drop it in the chat or connect with us afterwards if you're interested in getting that set up as well.
One thing
We could maybe go through.
Sorry, I was going to say one, I guess, feature that's kind of consistent across the board that I feel like isn't as maybe utilized or maybe just you don't know is the overview and the header and footer option that are newer in Outlaw. So for the overview, it's not something that you have to have, but it could be beneficial if you especially have long documents. So when Jordan did that preview, you saw that there were blue arrows pointing to spaces that needed to be completed. The overview allows you to essentially say, hey, I want all of it to be filled out, or some of the things that need to be filled out with the blue arrows. Generating this, you can add general text, you can add variables in, you can use those. I know Jordan talked about conditional logic. You can add conditional logic here to be utilized. So if you're like, we don't always have liens on our, settlements, I don't necessarily want the liens to show up if we don't have them. That would be a really great use case for this overview, is to say, hey, are there liens or not? If no, great, you can use the conditional logic to hide those. If there are, then they'll show. And then you can see Jordan is just bringing in the same kind of fields that we have in the actual document into the overview, so that it's a little bit easier for you and your team to see exactly what needs to be filled out so that nothing gets missed. Again, especially for longer documents, this is super helpful. And then outside of the overview, you'll also see next to it a header and footer option. This is where you can do kind of those customized headers and footers. If you saw in Jordan's preview, there was a footer that says page number, I think. So you might not want that. If you're seeing that, it's likely because the footer in this overview has been turned on and is visible. And so you just need to come in to turn it off. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's right here, and so you can see that it is blue right here, and it says print from startup document. If you're like, I don't really need a page number on here, you can come in here and just set it to do not print. That's actually going to turn this off, and so when we view this again, we shouldn't have a page number down there. You can see that that is now gone. So that is how you can update that. And there are a few things too with headers and footers that are really nice, because these are obviously built into the document itself. Obviously, we have our header up here that is dictated by what we uploaded to our FVDA org here. But if we want to get, more granular, and maybe you have multiple office locations, so you want to have, when this is settling in our Texas office, we want to have our Texas address, or when this is settling in New York, we have our New York address. So you can actually build out multiple headers here. So if we just wanted to insert one, we have options on if we want 1 column, 2 column, or 3, and we can just add those in and then say, this is our Texas letterhead. I'm making what's called an outlaw variable so that I can upload an image here. And then basically this will allow me to have multiple letterheads, and I don't have to just rely on the one that is uploaded to our org. So I've now made a couple different letterheads here. They do automatically default to this text box, but I can come down here and I can change this to an image. So when I upload an image, I will be able to have our New York letterhead there, same as our Texas one. Both of these, you'll notice, are still turned off. So what I would need to do is make sure I come in here and actually turn these on. I can turn on, you can notice, I have multiple, I don't have an options to start from start of document. That's because I have 2 different letterheads. So we don't want them competing against each other to show up, and we don't want them to show up at the same time. So to overcome this, we can easily add on a condition. Maybe you have somewhere in your case summary that you're actually saying that this can be a specific office location. We don't have anything. Let me just add in a variable really quick so that we can make a condition off of it, just so I can show you guys kind of what that looks like there. I'm going to turn this into a list, and I'm just going to have this say Texas or New York. And then basically what this is just turning into a drop down, which are really great for conditionals. So I've added this in. I'm going to click back up to my New York letterhead here. And I'm just going to find that office variable. So I'm going to say when office is 1 of New York, this letterhead is going to show up. And then I can go ahead and delete this variable out because I'm already using it. And then I can say when this one is 1 of Texas, this is going to show up. So now when I go in here, you notice that now that I have two letterheads, but they're set to be conditional, I actually do have the ability to start from the document so that I can have both of these, essentially show when those conditions are met. So that's a kind of cool way to use the headers and footers. And then something you would want to do there is just like, you know, you can either select this variable or you can have it pull in from your Filevine, but you can select that office location here. So now when I select that, one of my headers will show up instead of this generic one there. So that is a pretty cool setting, and you do have customization with it. So if you wanted to obviously insert our letterhead here, we can. But then if we wanted to actually add in the page numbers, we can insert custom page numbers right after it just by typing, a bracket here. And it's going to allow me to insert a page count. So that's going to be dynamic based on how many there are. And then you can also customize it, right? So if you wanted it to say, one of two, or if you just like this layout where it's the one with the dashes on either end, you can see by doing that, it's going to change how this actually looks. Now, I'm not sure you actually want a page number up in your header. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, but you can obviously do that in your header or in your footer here. I currently have this footer turned off, but if I were to add in another one, I can come in here and do that same bracket that I did, and then I can insert my page number, and then I can customize it over here. So it's nice that you have a full range of customization. That is a relatively new feature, and I'd say it's often underutilized, but it is really nice to know that it is there. So thank you for pointing that out, Jasmine. I feel like sometimes I get on these things and I'm like, what do I talk about? There's so much to talk about. So thank you.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, we kind of have this built out, and I did want to bring up, because you also mentioned, maybe you don't want to show expenses or liens or something like that on the settlement calculator. I'd say a lot of times, folks, when we're setting these up for them, they're like, we don't typically show the itemized expenses unless a client asks. So what we can do is say, show expenses on disbursement sheet. So we're basically asking a question, and then we can have here just a yes or no. I'm just making an outlaw variable so that we can have a selection there. And then again, I'm going to turn it into a list and have this be yes or no. Something else I see people not utilize as much is the default value. So if you're a law firm and you know that for the most part, you don't want the itemized expenses to show on your settlement disbursement sheet, I'm going to go ahead and set this to no, because that's already going to make the selection for you. You will still have the option to say, oh, we actually do want to show expenses, but that would just be one less step that you guys would have to go through. So now that I have this on my settlement overview, I'm also going to click into our expenses, and I'm going to find that yes, no that I set up. And I only want this to show when yes is selected, just because I do still have my expenses total that's going to pull in here, but I don't necessarily want to see my itemized expenses. So now when we go to preview this, we're going to notice a few different things. First off, we now have an overview. We previously didn't have an overview, but we can see now here's all the different questions that we have. We can select our office if we want to include our specific letterhead. You'll notice that our Vine Skills letterhead went away. That's because we selected Texas, so it's automatically going to populate a letterhead for Texas. Obviously, I haven't uploaded one, but if you did have one uploaded there, it would then populate your letterhead there. I also have this that I selected, do we want to show expenses on settlement sheet? It's defaulted to no, like we discussed, but if I wanted it to be yes, I can go ahead and select that there. And then I would just need to select my expenses. It looks like we only have one. This is purely going to right now pull into our overview. And it's worth noting that the overview actually isn't a part of the document. So when you export this, you're only going to see this portion here that's called our contract. We're just going to see our letterhead. You can see there's a little bit of a mismatch here because we're working with two letterheads, but you're not going to see this overview. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to have to delete this page when I send it off to a client. This won't even be here once you download it as a Word doc or PDF. This will just be gone. So That's kind of a nice feature. And then you can also see we have our liens and medicals, but we don't see our expenses, right? So if we go back here and we actually update this and say, I do want to see this on our disbursement sheet, you'll notice that this now automatically pops up because of the selection we made. So that's really cool. That's a great way to build out, I don't know, multiple iterations of your settlement calculator, how to build out certain filters within here so that when only certain things or certain conditions are met, other information will pop up. And that's also a good use just of an overview, because you can have all of this information here. And even if you selected no, I'm still going to be pulling in this $3,000 over here. But I don't have to show the itemized expenses there.
And for your outlaw variables, you can name them whatever you'd like. We try to name them as close to what type of data or, you know, the data that we're pulling in so that it's easy to identify. If you did do something like yes, no, and then had a yes, no question in the future that you're wanting to use an outlaw variable for, you will want to create a new kind of outlaw variable. That way the selection is different. If you just use yes, no over and over, as soon as you select yes for the first one, it'll transfer to all of the rest of the yes, nos, again, unless there's a unique name. So similar to Filevine, names have to be unique here for the outlaw variables in order for it to actually pull in what you're looking for or differences.
Yep, that's a really great point. And typically we try to obviously name them more descriptively than just yes or no, because you can have a lot of yes or no's, specifically if you're working with a lot of outlaw variables to build something out here. So something that you could look to put here is like, show expenses. You could name the variable that instead of a yes, no. And then that would just be a little bit more descriptive, because now we have a few yes nos here. We have a yes no one and a yes and a no. So you can see that this yes and no, because this is the same exact field, it is auto populated to no. If I change it, both of these change. So you do have to have it be unique, or else you're not going to be able to really reference the correct information there. So
Perfect. And just another note, the delete in outlaw is permanent. So any backspaces or using that delete button like you just saw Jordan do will delete it permanently. So be cautious as you all are going into outlaw. The trash can will prompt you, as you can see. If you're just using the backspace button, you're not going to get that prompt. So again, just be careful as you're kind of going in. And then another note, if you are trying to type within the same paragraph, Shift Enter is going to be your best friend. If you want a different paragraph, Enter will bring it into another paragraph for you. Even if your cursor is like in the middle of a paragraph and you press Enter, it's going to remove whatever's below it into a new paragraph. So just be careful there. Again, no undo button, so you'll have to just reformat there. Thanks, Jordan.
yeah, absolutely. And something to note though, the undo button is in works. I'm hoping for maybe like a awesome Lex release, and maybe that'll be available. I also know that something else people have noted is obviously when you indent in Outlaw, you can see it indents the whole paragraphs, all of these here, instead of just doing, the first line indent. And that is also coming. So soon you will be able to just, tab over and indent this one portion like you would in Word. So again, hoping that those are released soon, as those are some really great new features that a lot of folks have been asking for.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jordan. If you all are interested in any of Vine Skills services, we kind of run the gamut on all things Filevine, FVDA. We can obviously help you get items built out, train you and your staff. If you're like, hey, we want to build the documents, but we do want training on how to do it, definitely feel free to reach out. You can reach out to Jordan or myself. Our email addresses are our first name and then @vineskills.com. So you can reach out to any of our team members and we can definitely get you help there. We do these free help sessions every Wednesday, so feel free to join us for another session. Our topics do rotate. We try to add FVDA ones in there every now and then, so definitely join us for another one of those. And as always, if you have suggestions for upcoming sessions, definitely reach out and let us know what they are so that we can get those added into the rotation. Thanks so much, Jordan, and hopefully you'll have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.